I'm Tanya Meisenholder. I'm the Director of Gender Equity at the NYU School of Law Policing Project. We are really happy to have all of you here with us today. Appreciate you making the time. It's a busy week with conferences and whatnot. Um, so a couple of reminders before we get started. As just noted, we do record from the beginning. So if you want to take part in this after the case, you can sign back into our website in about a week and the recording will be back up. Please remember to keep your phones muted so that we don't inadvertently hear parts of your conversation that weren't intended for us to hear. And we will have some Q&A session at the end as well. Just a few quick updates on 30 by 30 before we get started. We did recently receive a COPS grant that we're very excited about, and that's going to enable us to provide those in the field with more resources. So you'll be hearing from us soon about what types of things that you really need to do to, or need to be more effective in this space. So very happy about that and looking forward to continuing to work with all of our agencies over the next few years. We have class 2 started about a year ago, but the reporting has not officially started. We expect that to begin at the end of the year. That's in part due to gathering all of the information that we've learned from class 1 and seeing what we can do to adjust that reporting and make it as fantastic as possible for all of our class 2 participating agencies. If you are in class 1, some of you are coming to kind of the end of your 2-year commitment. So we'll be reaching out to many of you to talk about what we think being a continuing agency looks like, and hope that all of you will continue to join us in this endeavor as we advance and support women moving forward. We had a really great panel at the IACP conference this year, talking about experiences from the field and what some folks in Arizona, Waco, Texas, and Miami have been doing. So we'll continue to share that information with all of you via our newsletters or other email communications. And please remember, you can always reach out to us at any time, and we'll do our best to answer your questions and direct you to others. So we're going to get started, and we're really excited today to have Amber Jordan with us from the United States Postal Inspection Service, one of our federal agencies. Amber has been with the USPIS for some time. She'll go into more detail of her background. She's our 30 by 30 liaison and has really pushed hard on how to implement this in her agency. So just a reminder, and I'm not sure that we say this enough, but 30 by 30 is not necessarily a one size fits all. What works in one agency won't necessarily work well in another agency. So she's going to talk about her experience, what they've been able to accomplish there, some of the challenges they've had, and at the end, we'll have an opportunity to ask her some questions. The other thing that I would add about Amber, besides being a phenomenal human being, is that she's very active in WIFL, the Women in Federal Law Enforcement organization. So we're proud of that partnership, as well as our partnership with many of our other partner organizations. Amber, I'm going to turn it over to you to give a bit more about your background, and then we'll get started with the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Tanya. So again, my name is Amber Jordan. I'm with the United States Postal Inspection Service. Currently, I am an inspector attorney, and I handle all of our EEOs for the East Coast and headquarters. I work on policies and corrective actions. Prior to that, I was with the agency in the New York division, and I handled criminal investigations dealing with financial fraud, particularly stock market manipulations. So that's a little bit about me. But prior to joining law enforcement, I've always been passionate about advocating for the underrepresented. And so I am a lawyer. That's what I went to law school for. And so when I heard about 30 for 30 and all the things that they were doing, I was excited to jump on board and bring this initiative to our agency. That being said, today we're going to give you an update on what the United States Postal Inspection Service has done with respect to the initiative, and give you some pointers if you're just starting a pledge, like what you can do afterwards, and maybe some best practices. And then we also want to talk about some challenges that we've seen and that you may have experienced throughout your journey with the pledge. So that being said, I want to give you a roadmap. Today, an agenda. We're going to do a quick pop quiz. We're going to talk about the phases that we've gone through as an agency with 30 for 30, starting off with phase 0, the beginning. Then we're going to talk about phase 1 and what we did in the first 6 months. Then we're going to take a slight pause, shift gears, and talk about the culture, what we did to focus on the culture of our agency. Then we're going to talk about phase 2, the final stage. Then I'm going to open up the floor and talk about challenges that we've experienced, and hopefully hear from you all about some of the challenges that you've experienced. And I don't want this to be a complaining section. We want to talk about the challenges, but I also want to offer solutions, or hear from you guys for solutions as to how we can overcome those challenges. So that being said, let's jump right in. Pop quiz. True or false? 30 for 30 is solely about ensuring law enforcement agencies have 30% female officers by the year 2030.
Folks,
Well, that
you can use
answers,
the, oh, do you want people to type in the chat?
yeah, you can type in the chat your responses. Can you tell me what you're saying in the responses for the
Well,
answers?
I of course wrote nope, but it's a lot of falses. So we're in good shape
Absolutely.
there.
Absolutely. You guys are absolutely right. What 30 for 30 is about is more than about a big number getting 30% by 2030. It's deeper than that. It's really about policy changes and cultural shifts. So with the 30 for 30 project, which attracted me to it was that we're focusing on making sure that agencies remove inherent biases from their policing, from assessments that they offer their officers, and from the policies within their agencies. We also want to make sure that when we invite women into the agencies, we're making sure that their specific needs are met, and we can do that through changing some of our policies. It's also about a cultural shift or change. We want to make sure that agencies are transformed so that the culture is inclusive and it supports and it celebrates the value of underrepresented officers and the diversity that's within. And also a goal of it is to increase the recruits in law enforcement classes by 2030. So let's talk about phase 0. What does phase 0 mean? That's what we did in the very beginning. So prior to even signing the pledge, we set up a meeting with our chief postal inspector and the co-founder, one of the co-founders of 30 for 30, Maureen McGaugh. And she came in along with Whiffle, and they sat down and they talked to our chief about what 30 for 30 was and what it would entail if he signed the pledge. After that, they gave us literature to read. He read it. He talked about it with our executive committee. They were all on board, and then he signed the pledge. And as all you know, the pledge is a 2-year commitment. The 2-year commitment basically says that your agency and our agency, we're going to agree to share information about what we've gone through, our successes and our challenges, and everything we've done as we implement the pledge. And we're going to do that every 6 months, or as close to every 6 months that we can. And we signed the pledge on June 2nd of 2023. And basically, for those of you guys who are new, the pledge is basically an agreement to implement low-cost or no-cost items that can improve representation for women in all ranks within your agency. So when we signed the pledge, and all of you guys will have done this when you signed the pledge, when we signed the pledge, our chief postal inspector wrote a letter, and he agreed to do certain things and sent that letter to the Department of Justice. Basically, he said when we participate in this pledge, we are agreeing to give data through 30 for 30, the data that they ask us to obtain. We are going to do essential data collection that's outlined in the pledge. We're going to look at other elements within the pledge to see how we can implement those into our agency to make sure our needs are met within the pledge. And we are also going to agree to report annually or biannually. So that's everything that he agreed to do when he signed onto the pledge. So I think this slide is really awesome. Even before we signed the pledge, after we met with Maureen McGaugh and Whiffle and explained to our chief postal inspector what the 30 for 30 initiative was, people were excited about it, and we came up with like a blueprint or a foundation a roadmap, if you will, of how we're going to organize the structure of 30 for 30 when it comes into our organization. So from the very beginning, once our chief postal inspector found out about the 30 for 30 initiative, he appointed an executive, a member of his executive committee, to be the sponsor behind the program. So that meant we had direct access to the chief postal inspector and to the executives within our organization. And anything associated with this project, we could go through Peter Verdina and we could have full access to the executive committee. We appointed a project lead. We also got someone from our legal department to be on board to help us if there were any legal issues that we might encounter. And then as you sign the pledge, you're going to agree to have a 30 for 30 liaison. And I'm the 30 for 30 liaison for our agency and also our agency's representative for WIFL. And then we said, okay, we need to have a core group of members who are going to meet weekly to get this thing started and come up with ideas and inform what our 30 for 30 initiative will look like. So on the left, you see our core working group members. We all agreed to meet basically every other week until we to put together what our concept will look like for 30 for 30. Once we put that together, we formed a coalition, and the people on the right are the coalition members. These are people throughout our agency who agreed and volunteered to participate in the initiative to help us achieve the items within the pledge. And then last but not least, at the bottom, 30 for 30 is not just a women-only movement, and so we included men within our organization, and we called them the League. So the men participated throughout our efforts to meet the elements of the pledge. So this is what our structure looked like before we even signed the pledge. After the chief met with the director of met with the founder of 30 for 30, we came up with this blueprint so that we could hit the ground running once we got into phase one. So this is what phase one entails. So when you sign the pledge, the first phase is the first 6 months after signing the pledge. When you sign the pledge, your agency is going to agree to do 6 things. And these 6 things are what the United States Postal Inspection Service was able to accomplish within the first 6 months. So the main thing that you have to do is have an idea of what you're going to do, kind of like a charter, for lack of better terms. And that's what we called our strategic plan. So we sat down and we came up with a strategic plan of how we were going to run the 30 for 30 initiative. Then we began to review all of our policies to make sure that there were no biases and to make sure that we affirmed that our agency had a zero tolerance for discrimination and for harassment. Then we set out to make sure that every single division and group within our organization had a designated space for nursing mothers who returned to work. And we sent out questionnaires to each of our divisions and groups to make sure that you have a room that's isolated, that has a lock, that's clean, that has a refrigerator. And if they didn't, we asked them to find these locations and designate them for us. And then we began to work on collecting our baseline data. So these are just some examples of some of the things that we did. I talked about a strategic plan. So this is one of the first things we came up with before doing anything else, was creating a strategic plan. I won't go into detail, I'll let you guys look at the screen, but this is what our strategic plan looked like. And we thought it was important to let everybody know that our chief postal inspector definitely bought into participating in the 30 for 30 initiative. So we had a message from him directly in the middle of our strategic plan. I talked about how we looked at all of our policies to make sure that they were bias-free and to affirm that there was a zero tolerance for discrimination and harassment. So here's an example of where we blatantly made it clear that our agency does not tolerate discrimination or harassment with respect to any protective class. I talked about lactation rooms and the Pump Act and what we did. So basically, we got data from all of our division and groups and made a spreadsheet. And so now, any person in our agency who's traveling, they can go to our homepage and they can look up this spreadsheet to see, okay, if I'm in Atlanta, this is a location I can go to if I need to express milk. If I'm in Boston, I can go to this location. And if there's any questions or confusions, we put the email address as well as the phone number of the individual to reach out to get information or to get the code to the room to use those spaces for lactation support. When it came to data, we definitely reported out to 30 for 30 what our data looked like. And this is an example of what our data looked like when we first started. When we first started, we found that our agency is made up of 21% of women. And 23% of those women are in leadership positions within our agency. So when we first started, that's what a snapshot in time looked like with respect to our representation within the agency. But then there's other items that have to be accomplished within 30 for 30 and within the pledge. So in order to do that, we came up with pledge teams. When you look at some of the things that need to be done within 30 for 30, they're broken up into different areas. And so some areas deal with threat management, right? That would be things such as bulletproof vests and making sure that equipment and gear is adequately supporting and fitting for women. We have a recruitment team, a mentorship team, a hiring team to look at the hiring practices within our agency. We also had a policy and compliance team to make sure that everything we did was in accordance with the law and that we were making our policies bias-free and supportive of women within the agency. We had a pump act team, and their sole purpose was to make sure that our agency designated spaces for women for the lactation support. Then we had a team that specifically focused on pulling data and analyzing the data. And then a survey team was also created. And when we created each team, we decided that we were going to have project leaders. So each team had a leader that was over the team, and they were responsible for scheduling meetings, taking notes, and just making sure that communication channels were open between all the groups. So that's what we did to ensure that we could accomplish some of the tasks within the 30 for 30 pledge. As an example, when we created each team, we wanted each team to have a purpose. So each of the teams that I just went through, there's a slide or a mission statement for each team that talks about what the purpose of that team is and what our goals are for that particular team. And then we laid out who the members of each team was. So those were prior, I talked about the 4 things that we did accomplish within the first 6 months. There were 2 other things that have to be accomplished within the first 6 months, and that's making sure that equipment for all women officers is appropriate and fits the officer, and then creating a survey for all employees. I know I said I was going to talk about challenges in the end, but I'll digress for a second here and talk about some of the challenges. So when we first started the pledge, 30 for 30 graciously gives you like a resource guide, right? And it has like examples and things that you can pull from to take to your organization. And in that, there was a sample of a survey that could be used to give to your organization. However, when we presented the survey to our leadership team, there were some concerns that the survey wasn't necessarily fit for federal law enforcement officers. It might be more tailored to universities or to a state level. And so instead of getting rid of the survey idea altogether, we were tasked with tapping into our subject matter experts within our organization. And so we have psychologists and individuals who their sole jobs are to create surveys and to analyze data for surveys. So we tapped into that resource and we sat down with them and worked for them for about 6 months, honestly, going over like what questions would look like, what information we're trying to glean to make sure that the questions that we asked were legally okay to ask and that would not get the agency, in any type of trouble in any type of manner. So we set out, we created our own survey that we felt was sufficient to use on the federal level, and we administered that survey this past August. And actually tomorrow, we're going to be sitting down with the subject matter experts and going over our survey results so that we can create an action plan. So we were a little bit outside of the 6 months, but we took the time to get it right and took the time to make sure that we tailored the pledge items specifically to our organization. And I do want to say and give a big thank you to Tanya and to Mo for this. 30 for 30, although there's timelines planted within the timetable, they are not. It's not as strict, you have to do this within 6 months, you have to do this within 8 months. The purpose of the whole initiative is to make sure that you make a meaningful and impactful change within your agency. So they would much rather us take the time, get it right, do something that actually makes a positive difference in your organization instead of focusing on meeting specific timelines. So again, we were outside of the 6 months, but I'm confident that we got it right. We met with our psychologists, and we made a survey that actually got the data that we needed to change our organization. We are still also working on, Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, Amber, can I say one? I'm really glad that you said that because I think that's really important for people to understand. While we definitely encourage folks to engage with their employees, whether it's through survey or focus group, whatever the case may be, we also recognize that that can be very challenging in some agencies. Perhaps they don't want to do a survey with just females, they want to include all of their employees, or they have too few females to do a survey, or there's a lot of surveys in the agency and there's survey fatigue. And so they want to push it out. Whatever the case may be, as Amber said, it's less important to us that you do it according to this particular time frame, and it's more important that you find a way to hear from the people in your agency about the issues that matter. And I can say that Amber and the Postal Inspection Service, they were fortunate that they had some survey expertise internally that was very helpful to them. Not everyone has that, but we do have connections with other folks and are always more than happy to do that as you move forward. So Amber, those were incredible points that I'm really glad that you made a note of as people are thinking about this. And I'm also anxious to see the results at some point. Thank you.
You're welcome. And another digression, but along the same lines, the whole entire intent of 30 for 30 is to make sure that your organization makes a cultural change to make it more inclusive and more fitting for everyone within your organization, with particular emphasis on the underrepresented. That being said, one of the requirements in the 30 for 30 is to report on your data, right? How many women you have, how many, like your minorities that you have in your organization, leadership positions. And originally, it was a spreadsheet that was given to each agency, and they wanted you to type in the information and then upload that information. Now, from the federal side of the house, I know that not just our agency, but other federal agencies were a little bit hesitant to put, in writing or to submit hard data showing their numbers. And so in order to still accomplish the purpose of the 30 for 30 initiative, Mo and Tanya agreed to meet with us, and we talked about it verbally, and shared our numbers with them verbally, because again, at the end of the day, it's not about recording information to have like a gotcha moment and everything is now memorialized. It's about looking at your numbers and coming up with an action plan to make sure that you can change your organization's culture to make everyone feel included. So that's another thing that also, when you're going through the exercises for 30 for 30, you'll see a written spreadsheet. They are definitely more than flexible with you and willing to work with you to make sure that whatever you provide protects your agency but gets to the core of the 30 for 30 mission. So that's what was done in the first 6 months, and a little bit after. And we still are working on equipment and getting attire for women that fits appropriately. So that's another thing that we're currently working on. But in between phase 1 and phase 2, which is the first 6 months to the next year to 2 years, we took a pause and started to focus more on the culture within the agency. Because as I said in the beginning, one of the aspects of 30 for 30 is to have a cultural transformation within your organization. So these next couple of slides are going to talk about what we did between phases 1 and 2 and our approach to building an effective workplace culture. So what did we do? We have held listening sessions or feedback sessions with our employees to understand, what is it, how do you feel about the organization? We wanted them to identify any gaps, any challenges, any barriers that they felt were in place to making them feel included. We wanted them to build relationships with each other and become mentors of a way to each other and help uplift each other. We wanted to not complain about the organization, but hear what was wrong and then come up with suggestions and recommendations to change those concerns. And then we also wanted to celebrate any successes that our organization was doing. So we had our first listening session during the Woeful Conference in 2023, and this was a list of the moderators who were there. And from the listening sessions, this is some of the feedback that we got from the participants. People were excited. They were saying, thank you for doing this. It was very helpful, impactful. They talked about sharing similar experiences. Even though everyone was from different backgrounds, they all had similar experiences that they had encountered in law enforcement. And I highlighted, I feel energized and inspired. I felt like I lost my drive, but after the day, I felt like I'm finding my way back. I feel heard for the first time in a long time. And to me, I highlighted the word feel, because so many women kept talking about how what we were doing changed the way that they felt. And I am definitely a strong advocate of digression, commercial break. So when I was in college, I was an English major. So back to the story. Literature. Maya Angelou was one of my favorite authors, poets of all time, and she said something that has always stuck with me. She said, people will forget, what you did or what you said, but they were always going to remember how you made them feel. So I thought this was crucial that everyone talked about how they felt after they attending these listening sessions. And recruitment is one of the things that WIFL stands for and 30 for 30 stands for. And to me, and retention, both stand for those things. But to me, the way to recruit and the way to retain your employees is to make sure that they feel included, they feel heard, and they feel inspired. So I was happy to see, the results from our listening sessions. People talked about how this made them feel like they were part of an organization, feel like they were heard again. So that's just some of the feedback that we got from our listening sessions. The next thing that we did was we had a leadership speaker series. So we had a series of speakers talk to the organization, and the first series we did was for inspectors or for criminal investigators, but the session was open to everyone, not just those. But these people were specifically former criminal investigators, and now they are women within our organization who are the top of their particular chain of command. So we heard from these women, we heard their stories, we heard their triumphs, and their testimonies. And as a result of that, we had 251 people registered, 4 people attended throughout the agency. And these are just some of the testimonies that came from people who participated in listening to that series. Again, we heard a lot of thank yous, what this did for me. People were saying they saw themselves in every single story that was shared, and they didn't realize how healing this was until they saw how others had gone through some of the same experiences and costs and sacrifices that they had gone through. Another person said what the panelists said had a major impact on them, and it inspired and motivated them. So again, when we're talking about culture, we just want to inspire, uplift, and have people hear firsthand stories of how other women within our organization were able to successfully make it to the top and lead their division. The next series that we had was for our uniformed officers within our organization. So we had women who are at the top leading ranks as captains within our uniformed officer series. So they provided a panel discussion about the things that they had been through. And here, again, we had 120 people attend, and these are some of the highlights from the participant testimonies. They basically said their careers have had an impactful past. Is to help what people heard during these seminars help them build up confidence within themselves. They said that they were provided with self-reflection, perspective, and belonging. So again, it's all about feeling belong, like you're included within an organization. They talked about how thankful they were that these women were open and willing to embrace uncomfortable situations and talk about some of the challenges that they had been through in their law enforcement career. And they said they're sure that something that they said people needed to hear to help them get back on track and propel them going forward and give them more confidence. So again, in order to enhance, increase our culture, we had these leadership series. Another thing that we did was education. I'm a proponent on education, and we created flyers for, and this is actually on our homepage and our webpage, but it's a flyer that deals with pregnancy protections, the policies that we have supporting pregnancy, and then a list of things to tell managers what they absolutely cannot do when it comes to pregnancy practices. Before I joined 30 for 30, throughout my career as an investigator, I would hear stories from women talking about how they were treated by their supervisors once they became pregnant, talking about how uncomfortable it was to express how this made them feel in a male-dominated organization. And so, we came up with the idea well, what if you didn't have to break the ice? What if you did not have to start that uncomfortable conversation? What if there was a one-page document that was already on the website and you could just, screenshot it, send it to your manager, or just have it in your hand and when you go talk to your manager, that could break the ice and make it easier for you to have that conversation about pregnancy and what it is that you need as a woman to help support your career in law enforcement. So we came up with this flyer, we posted it to our webpage, but we didn't stop there. We then developed training to go out to division, to management team, to teach them about the laws surrounding pregnancy protections, around pregnancy discrimination, and what they absolutely cannot do as a manager when it comes to pregnancy. So we did education, and while we were doing the education, we made sure to talk about to the managers what 30 for 30 was not about. A lot of times, like one of the challenges that we did face is that people within the organization think that it's only for women, it's only about promoting women, and we're lowering our standards so that women can get promoted. But that is, in fact, not the case with 30 for 30. So as we were teaching about pregnancy policies, we wanted to make sure that we explained to management throughout the agency what 30 for 30 was not about. We expressed strongly to them that it was not about gender stereotypes, it was not about lowering standards, it was not about removing men from policing, and it was not about only engaging women to create change. We also talked about what 30 for 30 was about and what we agreed to do as part of the 30 for 30 initiative. We talked about how it wasn't a deal that we signed to just hire women. Absolutely not. It was to make sure that the most qualified candidate was hired, to make sure that the most qualified candidate was promoted, and to make sure that we create a supportive and inclusive environment for all employees, not just for women, but for everyone within the organization. So we made sure that we got that message out when we did our trainings throughout the organization. We took steps to increase visibility within the organization with respect to 30 for 30, because you can't see or you can't understand what's not there. So we made sure on our homepage that we have the policies up front so people can see, oh, wow, there's a pregnancy discrimination poster. Oh, wow, there's information about lactation rooms, and this is on our homepage as soon as you enter into our intranet page. We also talked about the 30 for 30 initiative is one of our essential links. So when you go to our homepage, if you were within our organization, this is one of the first things that's going to pop up when you go into our organization's homepage. We've also, to increase the culture within our organization, we've collaborated with WIFL on several events, but one of the most recent ones was an event that we had, another webinar. It was last week, actually, on breast cancer awareness. And what we did during this webinar was we brought in our own medical director, and she gave a phenomenal presentation about breast cancer, talking about statistics, letting people know that breast cancer does not discriminate. Men can also be victims to breast cancer. She said a personal story about how a member in her family who was a male actually was diagnosed with breast cancer and what that looked like. And then we grabbed inspectors and workers within our organization who actually are breast cancer survivors. And we had them each share their story about, what their diagnosis looked like and the things that they did to cope to get through the diagnosis. And our chief post inspector definitely supported this. So we collaborated with WIFL to educate our employees on issues that affect women within the organization. We also supported WIFL to increase our culture at the WIFL conference. This was this year's conference, and as you can see, we had a large group of individuals attend the conference, and I want to say a special thank you to our Chief Postal Inspector who agreed to allow us to have funding for 60-plus women to attend this conference and just fellowship, mentor, and just learn more about ways to further the 30 for 30 initiative and support each other. So that's what we did some things that we have done to enhance our culture within the organization. Now back to the scheduled program, phase 2 of the 30 for 30 initiative. Phase 2 basically targets months 12 through month 24. And in this phase of the 30 for 30 initiative, this is where you're supposed to collect more data from the following areas. You're supposed to collect hiring data, promotion data, retention data, and recruitment data. Once you collect that data, we are supposed to analyze the data and then create and implement an action plan to figure out how you can increase representation of women within your organization and their experiences, enhance their experiences to make them favorable within your organization. So when you're looking at the hiring data, we were gathering data from applicants who applied versus the applicants who were actually hired. When you're looking at promotions, we collected data for people who actually applied to be promoted to the ones who actually received the promotions. When it came to retention, we were looking at the data to see, why people were leaving the agency, and also looking, including retirements. And then when it came to recruitment, we were looking to see, what type of individuals or what segment of society was responding to our recruitment strategies. So this is like what phase two looks like in the 30 for 30 initiative. And this is the phase that we're in now. And to be honest, this stage is much more difficult than the first stage, actually getting the data, knowing that if the data exists, getting the data, and then actually sitting down and analyzing the data and getting together with everyone to figure out an action plan that actually works for your agency. So this is where we are, and we're working on strategies to implement and move this portion of the phase along. In the final phase of 30 for 30, to me, the most important phase is whatever you do, at the end of the day, it's about making a positive difference, right? Like, so whatever comes out of the results of your 30 for 30 experience or project, make sure that whatever it is makes a positive difference for underrepresented people within your organization. And this is just an example. It's something small. Like I said, we created the pregnancy policies and discrimination poster. We posted it to our homepage. And this just shows how much of a difference this made in, like, particular individuals within our organization's lives. So one woman said to us, "Thank you. As silly as this sounds, seeing the poster on the internet brought a tear to my eye. This document will help so many people." Because like I said, it's difficult to have that conversation, with a male boss who's never been pregnant or who may never encountered a pregnant person in their life, in their family life. And they might not know how to deal with a woman who's pregnant and how to accommodate that particular woman. So again, whatever you do within your organization, it's important that, you make a difference. So that being said, I want to turn and talk to some of the challenges that I've seen with our 30 for 30 initiative. Like I said, we're in phase two, which is the final phase. And one of the challenges that I've seen so far, and that the team leaders that I've seen who are on our pledge teams that we've seen, is what do you do when no data exists, right? Because part of that phase two is to collect data and analyze the data. But if that data doesn't exist, how do you collect it and analyze it? And particularly what I'm referring to for us is recruitment data. We're finding that as an organization, we had not maintained a log of individuals that we have recruited. So we have no idea if they were male, female, what demographic they were, what age they were, what school they went to. None of that stuff. And so, we're meeting next week to set up a plan. Like, let me back up. I said I was going to talk about challenges and offer solutions. So one challenge is we don't have data for certain areas. And I mentioned recruitment. So the solution to that is we're going to meet next week, and we are going to come up with ideas to capture this data. Because it doesn't exist doesn't mean that it always doesn't have to exist. So one of the ideas we came up with was really old-fashioned, but basically creating a spreadsheet, and having each one of our recruiters take it to wherever they're doing their recruitment, and having the people who come by the booth just fill out the spreadsheet, and then offering some type of trinket or some type of appreciation for them filling out the spreadsheet, whether it's a challenge coin or some type of swag from the agency. But that's one way that we can gather that data, and then once we gather it, we'll be able to analyze it going forward. Sometimes when it comes to data not existing, you'll find that as you start to look through your data, maybe your agency doesn't collect data on a particular demographic. It could be for legal reasons, not sure, but, some agencies might not collect data when it comes to race, like the race of people that they hire. And so that's a conversation that you can have with your legal counsel or with the heads of your organizations to see if they will be willing to capture that data. Because at the end of the day, how can we fix a problem if we don't have the genuine facts in front of us to know where we're going moving forward? So that's something that you can do. Just talk to your legal counsel or your agency head to see if they will be willing to collect that data for the purpose of improving the culture, improving the experience of individuals within the organization. Another challenge that we've seen on the 30 for 30 project is what happens when members of the team don't participate. So what do I mean by that? So we have these pledge teams, and we have calls like every month, but sometimes people, will ask questions or who wants to volunteer to be on a sub-project. There might not be participation. So what do you do when it's quiet and no one wants to play ball anymore? For for us, we've come to the conclusion that it's important, the solution, when you're forming these teams, to maybe you want to do an interview process, right? To see who you want to put on your team. And I only say that because you want to see what the person's genuine motivation is to joining the team and being part of 30 for 30. If someone is a part of the 30 for 30 team or initiative or pledge just as a resume builder, they might not be motivated, they might not be encouraged, they might not want to participate in your cause. However, if you get individuals who are gung-ho, this is what they do, this is their passion, they've been on recruitment teams, they've done all these things, they do community service, whatever it might be, those are going to be the ones who are interested in participating and making the dialogue and the team dynamic more beneficial. So again, when people don't participate, before you even select your teams, I would say just check the motivations, have conversations with people, see why they genuinely want to join the team, and just don't pick people just because they say, hey, I want to do it, hey, I want to do it. Like, engage, have conversations to see why. What happens, another challenge, what happens when the newness wears off? So like I said, during the first 6 months, we were able to check through every one of the little pledge items that were on there. But then about month 7, the honeymoon was over. And, people, it started to slow down, and the happiness, the positivity about it, the momentum had slowed down. So what happens, when that happens in your organization? How do you keep things fresh and people excited about doing the 30 for 30 initiative? One thing that we discussed, the project team leads, is maybe you do shifts. And when I say shifts, the pledge has 6 months reporting requirements, right? So maybe every 6 months you rotate team members. Like you say, hey, you did the first 6 months. I see now it's the end of the fiscal year. You might be a manager. You might have a unit to run. Maybe you need to focus on that. You can come back, after the next 6 months, but let's give some other people in the organization a chance to get on board and hear more and fresher ideas. That way, it's always going to be new because you're going to have a new set of ideas rolling in every 6 months or every year throughout the project timeline. So that's one of the solutions that we came up with when the newness wears off. And then, too, accountability. Like, when things die down and people are just not as excited and not as responsive, there should be someone within your group who's going to hold folks accountable, like who will make those phone calls to say, like, hey, we haven't had a meeting in about 2 months. What's going on? Is there anything I can do to help? Do you need anything? Like, just talking to each other, communicating, holding each other accountable to make sure that we're on track to not necessarily meet the timelines, but we're on track to make meaningful change within the organization. Another challenge that we have seen is what happens when results aren't instant. A lot of these things on the challenge, you want quick feedback. Hey, we did this, we did this, we did that. But when it comes to making policy, right, when it comes to analyzing data and making an action plan, those things take time. And so what happens when the results aren't instant? The solution that we've had is just be persistent, be patient, and have a leadership team that's on board and very supportive of the initiative, and that you can have open and candid conversations with to say, hey, we submitted changes for recruitment flyers about 6 months ago. We haven't seen any turnaround. Like, do you mind management stepping in and talking to, like, the team that creates the flyers to see, like, if they can speed it up? Like, just having channels of support so that when you do face challenges, they can back you and try to push things along the way. And one other challenge that we've seen, or 2 more, is communication breakdown. Sometimes, like as you saw, we had 8 different pledge teams, and sometimes, each team is off doing their own thing, and might not communicate with each other. So we might do the same task, duplicate tasks, or just miscommunicate. So I would say the solution to that is just making sure that the project team leads are meeting every other week, or however your organization structured it, to make sure that we're all on the same path, we're all working together, we're not operating in silos, and whatever we do is going to be unified. That's something that I'm going to try to implement going forward, is to have meetings with just the project team leads so that we can check in with each other and hear what's going on. And then the last challenge that we've seen is just misinformation, right? So a lot of people in the organization, I won't say a lot of people, but some people in the organization or in your organizations might not be on board with 30 for 30. They might think that the 30 for 30 initiative is only about promoting women. I've had some conversations with some people who, have been interviewing for promotional positions, and they'll say, talking to me because we're friends, they might say something like, "Oh, I'm not going to get it because that whole 30 for 30 thing, they're going to pick a woman anyway." And that's when I'd be like, "Oh, whoa, 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 wait, no, no, it's not the whole 30 for 30 thing. They're not just going to pick a woman just to pick a woman. The point of 30 for 30 is to make sure that the best qualified individual is hired, and that we're not just hiring friends or buddies or like the old boys network." So again, there's a lot of misinformation out there about 30 for 30. Some people are not buying into it. So the solution to that is basically making sure that you educate your entire agency about what 30 for 30 is, and having more webinars like the ones we're having today. I said before that we educated the managers about 30 for 30 and about pregnancy protection. But one thing that I want to push going forward for the next fiscal year is that we actually educate the whole entire agency, whether it's a town hall, whether we go from division to division to division, and we talk to each and every employee so they understand that 30 for 30, at the end of the day, we do want to promote women, not promote women, but we do want to increase women to 30% representation in recruitment classes. But the main objective is to make sure that the policies are fair and equitable across the board. Because if they are, and if they're implemented fairly, then everyone will have a fair chance, and you're going to get the best candidate. And that could be a man or it could be a woman, but it won't automatically exclude women like things that have been done in the past. So that's it for me. I want to open the floor up to you guys to see if you have any questions, any concerns, any comments. And I want to say thank you for your time. If you ever want to get in contact with me or just talk about more about 30 for 30, here is my contact information. Definitely feel free to contact me on my cell phone. And then, of course, more information about 30 for 30. Here's how you can learn more about the initiative. So again, thank you guys for your time and your attention today.
Amber, thank you so much. And I'm going to open it up for questions in just a minute. But the way that the U.S. Postal Inspection Service has done this is just so by the book, so straightforward, so well coordinated and structured, and so much appreciated. It's clear that the agency takes this work very seriously. And as you noted, 30 by 30 is a commitment. It is a commitment to improving your workplace. And I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. We don't want women to go into agencies just to increase that number that are not healthy environments. Out of the 18,000 law enforcement agencies, 40% don't have any women. And, many of them are small, and that there may be reasons for that, but that is not what we're about. And we're not about lowering standards. We're not about special treatment. We're not about removing men from policing. So all of these are really important. The other thing that I would note, how many sworn personnel do y'all have?
Oh, it's on my slide. I want to say, I'll get back to you on that.
Okay. The point I would make to the audience is, before I joined 30 by 30, I was with the New York City Police Department. And the first thing that the commissioner at the time said to me when I presented 30 by 30 to him, he said, "Tanya, you can do this, but I'm going to hold you accountable." And it's, a lot of what Amber explained works well because she's in a larger agency and she's able to create teams and she's able to do a number of things that some of our smaller agencies can't do. But I think the areas that you raised about what does it take to be successful are really important. So having the support and the buy-in from the top, I don't know if I know we have Chief Clary on from Bellevue, one of our first agencies, and really one of the agencies that has just bought in so early and made it very clear to his department what this was about, in a much smaller agency than the Postal Inspection Service. That's really important. Dispelling those myths and that information and ensuring that people are educated and really know what 30 by 30 is about is on the part of the agency. It also means that we have some work to do from 30 by 30. And that's one of the things that we talk about. But that accountability piece, that commitment, who's the agency representative? Like, I bet every agency would want Amber because she can push this through. You're at the right level in the agency to get what you need from others. But unfortunately, not everyone's in the same situation to be able to identify a rep and give them the support they need to move forward. But you need to be very thoughtful about who's doing that. It's just really incredible, in terms of what you've done. And like I before, that point about us being flexible. We are very flexible. We want agencies to be successful in making their workplace better. And if that means that you can only do one thing, then that's okay. But because in our mind, that's successful. And your point about data is a very clear one. Some agencies will say we don't collect recruitment data because a lot of agencies don't. They might collect the number of events they go to, but they're not walking around, counting people. But what it's doing is it's prompting the agency to do exactly what y'all are doing, thinking about in the future, is there a way? Does it make sense for our agency? Is this direction that we want to go in order to continually improve our agency? So I'm just so thankful for y'all's partnership and for the work that you do. And that's why I really wanted you to come on today and talk to everyone about your success and your challenges and what people can learn from your experience. And then I will
So thank you.
pause and see if there's any questions from folks in the audience.
And while we're looking, so as of January 2024, we were 1660 for sworn officers.
Okay. How did you accommodate non-sworn or professional staff?
So for the professional staff, we included them in the survey that I was talking about. So one of the things for 30 for 30, originally in the 30 for 30 resource guide, it talks about surveying only women. But, our chief postal inspector thought it was important to, if we're trying to change the culture with the organization, we want to hear from everybody within the organization. So we also had questions built into our survey specifically for support staff to see what it was that they would need or want to feel more included within the organization. And like I said, tomorrow we're going to sit down and go over those results from the survey. And then from there, we're going to take those results and make action plans. And if there's things that we still have questions about from the survey, we plan to do more focus groups or more listening sessions so that we can tap in and dial in specifically to the needs of our workforce.
I think that's really important too. We've had a number of agencies, while we don't collect data yet, on non-sworn employees, we have encouraged them to include them as part of this work for the very reasons that you mentioned that. So I'm really glad to hear that y'all do that. And then the other thing that we, need to collect more information on is there's agencies that are doing things that are not in the pledge. So we want to hear about those items, and so that all of our agencies can learn from each other and think about what might work in another jurisdiction. Just because it's not, counted in our reporting doesn't mean that it's not successful and important an area for us all to grow and learn from each other.
And one thing that we did, we thought about when we did the webinar for breast cancer awareness, and we're going to follow with this at WIFL next year. But we were thinking, if we're trying to make it an inclusive, supportive culture, to have not mentorship groups, but support groups within the agency for people who have gone through different situations, right? Like you may have women who are in law enforcement who may be victims to domestic violence, who may be too embarrassed or too scared or too whatever to talk about it, but a support group for that. For people who are survivors of breast cancer or who have family members going through breast cancer, having a support group for that. Just having things that are central or, that women go through or experience, having a support group, whether it's grief, like maybe someone has lost or had a miscarriage or something like that, or having issues with IVF, just having a support group at work where you have a friend, you have a safe space, and you can talk and get counseling or get whatever you need to help you get throughout your day and your job performance duties.
That's great. Any questions from any folks in the audience? Got a quiet group today, Amber. That's all right. If we don't have any questions, Amber, unless you have anything else to add, we will close the webinar today, but it will be up on the website within the next week. And what I'd encourage all of you to do is think about what you're learning from implementation. How do you keep that pedal on? How do you keep the commitment in your agency? Because we all know that policing is so reactive in so many ways, and it's easy to lose sight of any particular path and switch to something else. So a lot of it has to do with the people that you have in place that are doing this work. The last thing that I'll make a note of too, this came up at IACP this week, is there has been some unfortunate negative rhetoric around women in policing over the past 2 months. And I think we all need to really think about that and some people have said, what that means and what we're all doing to support women in policing, and how particularly some of our men and women, of course, and I love Amber, I love the league, but how are you supporting and kind of standing up for some of the rhetoric that has happened across the United States over the past couple of months? So I leave that with you to think about the importance of allies in this work. And I'll point to Chief Clary again, because he has certainly been one of ours from the get-go, and the need for that throughout this profession. And Amber, just thanks again for joining us. I have a whole list of things that I wrote down when I think about how we can push more information out on implementation.